building leaders in this webinar today. And with this website, I have designed this so that you can actually use this website. It's interactive. You can use it and take it back to your actual school level team that's working with student data. And so hopefully it will help you as we go through this today. I'm going to talk about most of this, but again, this is a website. Feel free to use it all that you want to within your school level. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. Early warning, I will say, is probably one of the easiest pieces of Infinite Campus to actually do, to click around and understand the clicking. The hardest part of early warning is to really understand what early warning is and understand the data that you're getting from early warning, because I spend quite a bit of time, and most of this, the first few minutes, several minutes of this webinar is going to be helping you understand what early warning is, because I feel like that if you don't understand it, then you won't trust it and you won't use it. And so along with that, as you are using early warning, you are going to take it back to some of your building level decision makers, and you're going to have to be able to explain it to them also. And so that's why I spend quite a bit of time at the very beginning talking about what early warning is. I always tell everyone, early warning is probably my favorite part of Infinite Campus. My background is in data science and business analytics, and so I enjoy this part of Infinite Campus quite a lot. And another reason that I enjoy early warning is because we have never really had anything that's even close to this, except for the predictions that you get from EBOS within a system that we have, and it's so easily and so readily available in real time for us to be able to use. Right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I like to start here because when we talk about data-informed decisions, a lot of times there's some misconceptions about it. And one of the things that I want you to look at on this, and these are just some, this comes from a study that was done in 2021. And some of the misconceptions is database interventions lack a theory of action, data is only for accountability purposes, data equals test results, qualitative and quantitative, and technologies to support data are inadequate and don't allow a way to present data in a meaningful way. And as we know, this is not true, because especially with the system that we have now with Infinite Campus, you're going to see that it's going to be quite easy to make data real-time decisions based on the data that you are gathering. Okay. One thing I do like to point out on this also is number 4, technologies to support it are inadequate and don't allow a way to present data in a meaningful way. And I think you're going to see that that is definitely not true with what we're going to look at today within Infinite Campus. All right. So as we go on, I also like to mention here that this whole thing is geared around early warning. And so when we talk about what is early warning, you will have to have the tool rights. And so when we get into the system, I'll show you where what you need to be able to see early warning. All right, let's go on. And I also like to spend just a little bit of time and show you that, remember, this is interactive. So if you decide that you want to use this website, this is one of the things that you could use with the ones that you are sharing this with. But what is the difference between data and information? And data to me is just raw facts, but the information is what you're going to do with that, how you're aggregating that to make it meaningful so that you can make some actions or have some action plan to go along with the data. And again, this is just an example that is interactive. If you want to use this, you are so welcome to, but data is just a collection of facts. Information is organized in a way so we can do some analysis and interpretation. And knowledge is what you gain from that data. And then of course, what leads from that knowledge is what are the decisions and the actions? What adjustments are you going to make to any of your instructional practices? What are some supports that you're going to put in place to help the student learning? And I've done a lot of work around MTSS with our regional. I am from the Sandhills region, so I've done a lot of work with our Sandhills regional MTSS person. And she asked me, she said, Lynn, will you please put this in your presentation? And the more that I've worked with her, I'm understanding why. Because again, we can have all the data and we can have data for this, this, and this. However, if you don't have effective practices in place, and you don't have a good implementation of those practices, and everyone doesn't understand the context of why you're doing those practices, then you're not going to have the improved outcome. But when you have all of three of these working together, then you're going to see the outcomes that you need. And data, what some of the data that you see and that you can get from the system may help you identify where that you are lacking in some effective implementation and some practices. But it's not going to improve. You have to have these pieces in place. Okay. Now, I do like to point this out because, again, as the regional consultant for MTSS and I started working together, what we realized was that early warning in Infinite Campus is not the same as early warning in ECATS. So if you use ECATS early warning, that is the most similar to Insights. And so Insights, I am doing a session today at 12, and I'm doing an advanced session of Insights at 3 o'clock today. But ECATS dashboards is very similar to what you can do in Insights. But the early warning system is not similar to ECATS. ECATS is more of cut scores, how many absences, what did they make on these test scores. Early warning is not that. Early warning does not deal in cut scores. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about what early warning is. All right, early warning is it's a dashboard. And again, when we get into the system, and I'm not going to just talk through all of this, we are going to go into the system and click around and look at what early warning does. But early warning is a machine learning tool, and it is an actual subset of artificial intelligence. But it is code that takes information about a student and all the features of that student. It compares those features to like students, and it gives you what's called a grad score. Now, this grad score is, and I meant to change this to all capital letters, but this grad score indicates whether a student is likely to graduate or not graduate. And I say persistence to graduation because even a kindergarten student, what are we trying to do with that kindergarten student? We're trying to get them to the next grade level. So now for you to have rights to early warning, it is under student information, it's under counseling, and you're going to see a link that says early warning. And I get asked the question a lot, who should have rights to this? And I feel like any of your building level administrators, any of your instructional coaches, your counselors, your social workers, all of these that are working at the building level with students, I feel like they need rights to early warning. You do want to make sure that everyone is mindful of FERPA, because you do see a lot of information within the early warning system. Also, before we move on, I want to point out within this presentation, anytime you see a blue box, there's a link out to early warning to give you more information about the early warning system. Okay. Now I'm going to go on down here and let's talk a little bit about the machine learning. All right. It is a statistical algorithm, and the best way that I can explain it to you, and it's hard to do this on a webinar, but if I'm in person, I usually have something I hold in my hand. But I say that when you have a third grade student that comes into your school, that third grade student has features, all right, and some of those features may be their past attendance, it may be their current performance in their classes, it may be even their living arrangements, how many times that they moved, how many enrollments that they had. Well, what it does is it takes those features of that third grade student and it compares it to all the past third grade students within your school, all the third grade students within your district, all the third grade students within the state, and the third grade students nationally. And it says based on the features of that student. Now, again, this is a machine learned code, but based on the features of that student, is that student likely to promote to the next grade level? And so and I get asked a lot, well, what data goes into this? Well, some of the data points that are in this is linked here in this link that you see in the presentation where it says data points used in the model. But you have to realize that with machine learning, those features are constantly getting changed and adjusted. So if a feature is not really a good indicator of whether a student is going to promote to the next grade level, then that feature will drop off and it won't be used in the model. So the model is constantly adjusting itself based on what is a good indicator of whether that student will promote to the next grade level. All right, now a few things that you need to know. Early warning is displayed for the current active year only. So if you go back, we're in 25-26. If you go to 24-25, it's going to say there's no early warning score. All right. I was asked this question, what if I wanted to look at a student's early warning score over time? Well, if you want to do that, then you're going to have to export those scores and have a secure place that you save that so that you can do those comparisons of the early warning score. All right. Early warning scores can be used with students in grades K through 12 as long as they have information within the SIS. So when I say a kindergarten student coming in, they have an early warning score if they have data that is in the system. Okay. It can be turned on, and we talked about this, has to be turned on for users, and you have to have certain tool rights. The student's grad score is constantly updated. Now, this is what makes this so wonderful is this part here. The student's grad score is in real time. And so what that means is as data goes into Infinite Campus, then that data is constantly being used in the model to predict whether this student is going to promote to the next grade level. So for example, let's say a student has a really low curriculum score, and that's of course affecting their grad score. And in that curriculum score, let's say that curriculum score is they have missed 25 assignments. All right. Well, you've been working with that student and that student turns in 20 of those assignments. Well, of course, that is something in real time that is changing, and that real time data is actually going into the model and says now they're not missing 25 assignments, they're only missing 5 assignments, and the model is adjusted based on that. Another thing that it does is it compares students to like students, and it contains students' entire history as long as it is in the SIS. So it has to be in the SIS. Now, I realize that we have some school districts that have just started on Infinite Campus, and you've only been on Infinite Campus 3 months now, 2 months now, feels like longer, but you've only been on it for 2 months now. And so it is going to take a little bit of time for the machine learning code for the data to normalize. And what that means is, and I like to use an example to explain it of me shopping on Amazon. If I'm shopping on Amazon and I only buy 3 things, Amazon is not going to learn my shopping patterns very, very well just for 3 things. Unfortunately, I don't only buy 3 things on Amazon. I buy hundreds of things on Amazon. So Amazon learns my shopping habits very well. That's the same way that this works. It compares students to like students, but it also has to have enough data in the system about those students to be able to make those comparisons. Okay. So just keep that in mind, and you're going to get a message at the top that says you need at least 2 years of data for basically the curves to normalize and for it to be a true good prediction. I have done this presentation a lot with principals. I love doing it with principals because they know their students. And I have yet to have a principal to say, no, that's not a student I already have on my radar. Even ones that have only been on Infinite Campus a short time. They all say, yeah, this is pretty close to the ones that I'm already making sure that we're putting some supports in place. Okay. Now, new students may have an unknown grad score or no grad score. Okay. So if it's a new student, again, it's going to take a little bit of time to get enough data about that student for it to really give you a true picture. I get asked this one quite a bit. Is the student's privacy protected? Yes. The information about the student is saved, but it cannot be tracked back to the individual or any past students. In other words, it's not giving student numbers, it's not giving names, it's not giving things like that. So the student's information is protected. I am not going to play this video in this webinar because I think that would be tough to see through a webinar, but I do want you to come back later and watch it because this is just an introduction to early warning in Infinite Campus. But I want to get to this part, understanding the GRAD score. Okay. The GRAD score, it stands for Graduation Related Analytic Data, and it is a single number that summarizes a student's likelihood of graduating or promoting to the next grade level. All right, so again, a second grader can have a GRAD score because what's their likelihood of promoting to the next grade level? Okay. I'm going to skip. You can come back and read that. What I want you to see is I want you to see this graph here. So in this graph, a student gets what's called a GRAD score. And that GRAD score takes everything into account. It takes into account their attendance, behavior, stability, so much more, their curriculum. It takes into account their historical data, their current data, the changes in the data, which is extremely difficult from an analyst standpoint. Changes in data is extremely difficult to pull and to analyze, but it's looking at changes in data and it's doing student comparisons. And what it is doing with that GRAD score is it is saying based on all the features of this student. So here's a student based on all the features of that student, it is going to assign a number from 50 to 150. Okay. So the closer that a student is to 50, the closer they are to 50, the higher the risk that that student is of not promoting to the next grade level. The closer that a student is to 150, the less risk they have of not promoting to the next grade level. So what you're looking at is you're looking at students that are in the lower 50s, excuse me, that are in the range of 50 to 100, something like that. But you're looking at students that are on this end that are having some issues in one of these areas, or overall their GRAD score is extremely low. Okay. As I'm looking at this GRAD score, I always tell everyone, I wish they would sort of sometimes I wish they would just leave the colors off, because sometimes the colors can be misleading. What I want you to pay more attention to is the numbers. And I want you to remember, the closer it is to 150, the closer it is to 50, the higher the risk is that that student's not going to promote to the next grade level. The closer it is to 150, the less risk is that they're not going to promote to the next grade level. So Infinite Campus, the code actually assigns a number from 50 to 150. And based on that number, they are predicting the likelihood of whether that student is going to promote to the next grade level. Now, I always tell everyone, that's what the GRAD score is. The GRAD score is all of these taken into account. But I always tell everyone it's like you're getting 5 for the price of 1. Because not only do you get the overall GRAD score that looks at everything, you also get what's called an attendance score. And it is a separate score based just on that student's attendance features. You're also going to get a behavior score, a stability score, and a curriculum score. And then you get everything that rolls into your GRAD score. And not only that, the scores that it's generating is real time. So a student that's struggling in attendance and then their attendance improves, then you're going to actually see that attendance score change. And they should change. Think about it. These scores should change because you should be identifying these students that need supports put in place, and then putting those supports in place, you should see a change in those students' different scores that they have in the area. So for example, if I was a social worker, this attendance score is going to look at your tardies, your absences, your attendance percentages, and a whole lot more. And so when you're looking at the attendance score, these are some students that you might need to make sure that you have on your radar. If you are a behavior administrator, it looks at the number of behavior incidents, the suspensions, the total incident count. Your historical behavior data did come over if you are a phase 2, and if you're phase 1, then you have your behavior data. Also, instability, it's looking at your portal logins, your address data, your enrollment data. So under stability, it's looking at how long has a student lived at this address? How many address changes have they had? What are their enrollment data? How many schools have they had to move within so many years? It's looking at their portal logins. Their portal logins will tell you about engagement. And so is the parent logging into the portal? Again, that's engagement. And so it's looking at all of those different things within stability. In the address data, we always tell data managers that you end date, you don't delete, because a student that has lived at 5 different addresses within a school year, those moves could have affected their stability score, and it could have affected their learning, which is what all of this is trying to get to. Is that student going to struggle and not be able to promote to the next grade level? As you're looking at this, I like to point out under the stability side, when you're looking at your address data, if the address that the student last had in PowerSchool came over into Infinite Campus, and the start date for that address is 1901. And so on anything like that, I always tell everyone, well, if I've lived at an address 125 years, I'm pretty stable. But you have to realize everybody in the state of North Carolina, their first address started at 1901. So that is not affecting the model and not moving the model. Because remember, the model does a comparison to like students. And so it is not affecting the model at all. What will affect the model is you got that original address and that student moved several more times. That is feeding into the model to say, hey, the student has a low GPA and they've also moved 5 times. Right? Curriculum, it's looking at your failing grades, your missing assignments, it's looking at GPA, it's looking at your earned credits. Also GPA, we know that GPA is a high predictor of whether a student is going to promote to the next grade level. So for example, if you have a student that is in the 10th grade and they have a 2.1 GPA, that student's struggling. Their GPA is a high predictor of whether they're going to promote to the next grade level or not. And so a student with a GPA of 2.1 as opposed to a student in 10th grade with a GPA of 3.7, we know that the 2.1 student is probably going to have a lower grad score because they're struggling to promote to the next grade level because they have a low GPA. And so again, GPA is a very high predictor. Now, there is a video that I do want you to come back and watch. And this video actually takes you through how you can understand Infinite Campus and how they apply those grad scores. I am not going to play this video, but I am going to go to the last picture on this, and I keep meaning to bring out I keep meaning to do a screenshot of this and I forget to every time. But I want to show you, these are our numbers, 50 to 150. So high risk, very high risk of not promoting to the next grade level, very low risk of not promoting to the next grade level. And so what it does is it takes a student. So here's a student that comes in. It takes this student and it looks at all the features of this student. So let's suppose that this student has been absent for 5 days. And let's suppose that this student not only has been absent for 5 days, but they also have a GPA of, like we're talking about, a GPA of 2.1. Well, as it looks at the student, it looks at the features of this student that are causing this student to have possibly a low grad score. And so what you are doing on your side is I'm looking at what are the areas that a student is struggling in and what supports can I put in place. And so what early warning is going to do is it is going to help you identify some areas that a student may be struggling and what areas you need to put some supports in place first, because we can't do everything, but it may help you identify some areas to put some supports in place first so that you can help that student and change that student's predictability of that they are going to promote to the next grade level. Now, another example of this, if I wanted to show you, if I want to talk a little bit more to help you understand, let's say a student's been absent for five days, and that student has the 2.1 GPA. Well, those 5 days could affect that student's promotion to the next grade level because they have a low GPA. But what if you got a student, the same student, that's been absent for 5 days? These features are the same. Both have been absent for 5 days, but this student has a 3.9 GPA. Well, these 5 days absence are probably not affecting whether that student is going to promote to the next grade level. This is why I say we do not have anything like this within education. Again, the only thing close to this is probably EVOS, and EVOS is only looking at test scores. But this is looking at the entire child and trying to help you determine what are some things or some factors that might help that might prevent that child from promoting to the next grade level. Okay. I do want to mention, I don't know when it's coming, but I've heard from the owner of Infinite Campus that they are also working on the AI code that will tell you some of the supports that you should put in place to help that student improve their grad score or their likely or improve their likeliness of promoting to the next grade level. This is coming. I don't know when it's coming. So right now you have to sort of identify, and then you say, well, attendance is an issue. What are some supports that I can put in place to help the student with attendance? Okay. Please go back and watch that. All right. Now, I'm going to everything else that I talk about within the system we're going to do it within the system. And so if you have rights to it, you can follow along. But I also have pictures of this that show what we're doing. Also, if you notice that as you're looking at the grad scores, I have a Tango here that shows you how to look at the grad scores. So if you come back later and you forget, this will show you. This will help you dig a little deeper into the student details. As you're digging deeper into the student details, there are some questions that you can practice. So if you want to pull these up and do some practice questions with your staff, there are some interactive questions at the end that will help you. Okay, but let's go into the system now. Okay, now notice I'm in the 25-26 school year. And to get to early warning, I'm going to go to student information, and we're going to go to early warning. Okay, so within the early warning system, all of this should make some sense to you now that we've done about a 30-minute explanation of early warning. But as you're looking at this, if you have rights to more than one school, then you can add those schools here, and I can see more than one school with their grad score or whatever that I'm looking at. I'm going to stay in one. Stay in Tyler. Okay. Now, the next thing, I can take this and I can choose different grade levels. So I do know that Tyler is a high school. So I can go and click on grade 11. If I just want to look at my 11th grade students, then my 11th grade students, this graph is adjusting. This graph adjusts to the settings that I choose here. So whatever you see in the score distribution is based on what I choose within this area. So now within this area, I can choose a school, I can choose the grade level. I can also choose a score that I was talking about. I can choose whether I want to look at the grad score, the attendance, the behavior, the curriculum stability. So if I'm a social worker, I may come back and only look at attendance. And in attendance, I want to change. And my graph here, there's no way I can target 722 students. I'm going to go down to the 5th percentile and below. And now I've got about 85 students that are in the 4th percentile and below with a grad score, with an attendance score of 50 to 92. That is what you're looking at here. So here is my score of 50 to 92. These are the students that are in the high risk, and these are these students. And this shows the distribution of their scores. So you have students that are closer in distribution to the 90s. In this, what I've chosen for the high in the 4th percentile and below. Okay. Now, I always like to mention here, but before I left my last position with the district that I was with, I was working on doing the machine learning code to just do attendance for them. And just doing attendance, it was taking me forever to it wasn't so difficult to do the machine learning code. The difficult part was pulling all the data and pulling all the features that would go into putting it into the machine learning code for them to give me a prediction. Because what we were wanting to do was we were wanting to take kindergarten, first and second grade students, and when they came into our school system, we wanted to know if they were going to have an issue with attendance, so that we could early on start putting in, based on the features of those students, start putting in supports early on at that young age, so that they won't have attendance issues their entire school year, or excuse me, their entire educational years. And so it was taking me forever, and that data and that model was only as good as I could actually pull the data and run it through the code. So what you're getting in Infinite Campus is you're getting this when that data goes into the system. This model is constantly adjusting as that data is input into the system in real time. I could have never done it in real time. I could only pull it at the certain times that I was going to pull it. But you're getting attendance, you're getting the grad score that covers everything. So as you're looking at this, I can change this. So if 94 students are too much for me to target right now with a low grad score, then I can go on down. I can go to the 3 percentile and lower. And when I go to the 3 percentile and lower, then there's about 55 students that I can target in the high risk. The medium risk, again, I can set my medium risk. I can make it lower. Here's my students that are in the medium risk. And notice it's bringing my numbers down in my student count. As I change my percentile, it brings my numbers down. So the graph adjusts based on what I choose. Also down here, the colors and all of that good stuff adjust based on what I choose here for who I want in my high, medium, and low risk. Okay. Remember, low risk, closer to 150, high risk, closer to 50. Okay. And I will say this is a machine learning code. I have yet to see a student that has an exact 50, and I have yet to see a student that has an exact 150. It's usually closer to those numbers. All right. Now, let's suppose that you are working with a student, and I would, first of all, I would never tell a student what their grad score is. This grad score, any of these scores are only used for informational purposes for you to help you put supports in place for those students. But let's suppose that you are working with a student and you just want to pull this data up ahead of time to see areas that they might be struggling that you might could help them with. And so if I want to do a student search, I could pull up and type in, let's say I want to look at Warren or Jaden. I could do Alderman. And there is my student, Jaden Alderman, and it pulls up and doesn't show anyone else. So I can do a student search. So if you have large numbers, then you can do a student search and not have to search through all the screens to find your students. Okay. Ad hoc filter. I can also, if I have an ad hoc filter, there are some state published filters. So if I wanted to just look at my 504 students, I wanted to look at just my AIG students, then I could pull up, or my EL students, I could pull up those students. I always like to, I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning. This is a training site, so all the data is scrambled, so we're not violating FERPA. But here are my EL students, and it's listing all of my students that I have within this filter. I can also do another grade level here. I can change my grade level up here either way. All right. Now, if I only want to see my students that are at high risk, I click the high, and it's going to show me my students at the high risk. All right. Why would I want to do that? All right. We'll come back to that in just a second. I can do the same if I want to look at high and medium. It's only going to show my students that have high and medium risk. If I want to look at my low risk students and say, well, maybe there's an area that they're struggling that we could help them and push them a little bit more, then you can click low, and it's going to show just your low risk students. All right. Now, let's suppose that I have high risk students, and in those high risk students, I want to put them on my watch list. So my high risk, I should have 55 students, then they're all in the 3 percentile and below. They have a score of 70 and below, so 50 to 70. And so these are high risk students. Well, I can click watch all. And when I click watch all on those students, what that means is when I come back into this, let's say I come in a week later and I pull this up again, under early warning, I can come back and I can click on just my watch list students, and it's going to pull up those students that I've been watching. Now, why would you want to do that? The first reason you want to do that is because if you are putting supports in place, then that grad score should be changing. So as you check it a week out, or 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, those supports that you're putting in place should be affecting that student's grad score. All right. So as I'm doing this, also with the watch list, another nice thing that you can use the watch list for, and we'll talk about this in Insights, but I can pull up just my watch list students through the dashboards and only see the data for the students that are on my watch list. So these areas within Infant Campus tie in together. All right. Now, I can also, under caseload, if let's suppose that you're a district that has implemented the response to intervention. And so in response to intervention, those students, once you are progress monitoring those students, then those students are automatically going to be put on your caseload. And so if I come in and I click caseload, I'm only going to see the students that I am progress monitoring. And so those are my caseload students. If you are like a counselor and you've added students to your caseloads, then if I click caseload, it's only going to show the students that are on my caseload. So it's just helping you quickly get to the students that you are monitoring. All right, now let's go on down to here to the bottom. I'm going to keep this on independent category outcome because I want to go back and I want to reference this as you're looking at the grad score. Find it. Okay, so as you're looking at this, remember, you get 5 for the price of 1. So I get all of these in I get a separate score for each of these areas, but I also get my overall grad score. So when you are looking at that, this is my overall grad score, but I'm also getting a score for attendance. I'm getting one for behavior. Oops. I'm getting one for behavior. I'm getting one for curriculum. I'm getting one for stability. And then I get my overall grad score, which takes this and so much more into account for this overall score. If I wanted to see this school has 1,800 students, if I wanted to just sort my grad scores from low to high, if I hover beside the word grad score and click, there's an invisible arrow that appears and it sorts them from low to high. So I can get all of my students from low to high. If I click it again, it's going to sort it from high to low. And then and if I click it a second time, it takes it off. Now I can also sort by grad score and then come over and sort by my behavior scores if I want to. Okay. But that's just an invisible sort that is there. If I only want to look at my high risk students, I can click high risk. And then what I can do is I can come over and click watch and watch only my high risk students. All right, the next thing, these are independent scores. So if I was a social worker working with students with attendance, I would come into this attendance category and click and sort it from low to high. And then I would know that these are the students that I need to start working with and putting some supports in place for attendance. Okay. Now, I do want to show you with the colors. If you notice, if I sort attendance, my colors go my scores go from 60 to 94. If I sort it, I'm going to take off attendance and I sort behavior. My scores go from 68. And notice it's red all the way down on this first screen of what I have. That's why the colors can be deceiving. On colors, you need to make sure that you use it with a sort of as a guide, but look at the numbers. The closer to 50, the higher the risk, the closer to 150, the less risk. And the reason I say that is because I had a principal one time that says they questioned the curriculum score and they had a really good question. And I had to go back and do some research on it to be able to answer this principal. But this principal is like, well, look, my student scores the lowest ones in like the 120s, I think, and they're red. Well, that's because that was, and when I went and I started digging a little deeper, they were a very high performing school. And so that curriculum score, their lowest score was 120 to, I think 149. And the 120s, the 130s was red because that was their lowest scores for that area for that school. Okay. So again, keep in mind, look at your curriculum, excuse me, look at your number, not so much the color. Okay. Now this is one that I like. It's called category impact. And the way I tell everyone to look at this is you're going to look across and notice that when I click category impact, category outcome signs at number 50 to 150. But when I click category impact, it assigns a number. And I tell everyone to read this as the number that is furthest from zero. Okay, now again, I'm an old math teacher, so we know zero is neither negative or positive. But when you're looking at this, what number listed is the furthest from zero? Well, negative 78 is definitely further from zero than a negative 3. So I know on this student, if I'm looking across here at all of these three areas, now these may not be the only three things or four things, but if I'm looking across at these four areas, if I start putting supports here in the curriculum area, then that means that that student, that the curriculum is the will have the most impact on that student's grad score the fastest. Okay, so curriculum is where they're struggling the most. If you go on down and look at this one, I can see that it is again the curriculum area. All right. Now these other areas may have some. Let's find one that's not curriculum. Now here's one. Okay, so this student has an 86 closer to 50, so that is one that might be on my radar. But if I'm looking at across at their numbers, which one is the furthest from zero? The negative 10. So that means if there's something in the stability area, if I put some supports in place there, that will have the most and the quickest impact on that student's grad score. So that's how you look at that going across. I had a question. If I wanted a stop in time of students' grad scores, you can export to Excel and that will give you that stop in time of their grad score. So if I open this in Excel, I'm going to see right now I have it on category impact. So it's probably going to show me my category impact. You can pull their grad scores through ad hoc filters. And so I'm doing an assessment webinar on Wednesday on aggregating assessment data. And one of the things that we can talk about, or we do talk about in that, is that your grad score is part of it. Now, this is one that I don't think y'all can see it too well, but notice that it export exactly what you saw on the screen. So I had it on category impact and it's showing my category impact scores for the students and not their actual grad score that they got for behavior, attendance, curriculum stability. But that is a way that you can get that if you want a stop in time for that. I can export it. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper and we're almost done with this. All right, when you go a little deeper into this, let's suppose that I want to look at, let's see, I'm going to get one that's, look at Daryl. Okay, when I'm looking at Daryl, now I don't have really great data because this is a training site and there's only like 2 months, but you are going to, even if you are phase 2, you already have 2.5 months of data that you can pull in. But I'm going to change this to last 12 months. If you're phase 1, you got some awesome graphs here. But what these graphs do is they sort of show you, not sort of, they show you where that student's grad score was in time. And not just their grad score, it shows their stability, curriculum, behavior, and attendance. So what this can do is this can help you identify maybe some time periods that the student was struggling and then dig a little deeper and see what's going on with that student during that time period. I mean, it could be the death of a family member, and that would show in all of these areas during that time period, and that would help it make more sense to you as why that student was struggling then. Also, so that's what you would use this for. There's a button here that says show category impact weighting. If I go back, this is my category impact weighting and showing which one of these have the most impact on that grad score. So if I go and I click again on Daryl and I click show category impact, it also shows you at that stop in time which one of these areas had the most impact on that student's grad score. And of course, I can see I only have 2 months of data, but in those 2 months of data, the curriculum has the most impact on that student's grad score. And again, if I hover over it, it's going to show me their curriculum score. It's going to show me at that stop in time, it's going to show me what it is. Okay. Now I can come over here to the top right, and in the top right, it's going to show you basically a picture of what you see here in the numbers. This is going to be a picture. And I tell everyone when you're reading this, the bar graph that is the tallest is the one that's having the most impact. So don't look at the colors, look at the bar that is the tallest. So I know that curriculum is the tallest and stability would be the next one to put some supports in place. But there's so much discrepancy here. Curriculum is where you need to concentrate. If you want to go out and you want to look at other students, or excuse me, you want to go out and you want to look at more information about this student, I don't have to find the student, go to student information, find these pages. I can just click and it will take me to their schedule, their grades, assessment data, behavior, attendance, transcript, and their actual profile. This one I like for especially building level administrators. If you are using early warning and you're looking at your students and you're like, oh, I wonder if the student is on anyone's radar. Well, this right here will tell you if that student is on someone else's radar. But what you have to do is you have to train your staff that if you're working with a student, add them to your watch list so that I know that they are on your watch list. Okay. Now let's go on. This will help you dig a little bit deeper. So as I'm looking at, I'm going to change this back to the category. As I'm looking at these scores, they have a 52, a 103 in behavior, a 126. This student's sort of a little bit all over the place. I wouldn't worry too much about the 102, 126, but the curriculum and the behavior, I probably would as I'm clicking on this. Now, behavior is one that's going to throw you off a little bit. If that student has no behavior data, I look closer at the number, it's above 100, would not worry about that. Although, because I don't have any behavior data in there. So it's doing a comparison to all of your students. I see this a lot, especially with our phase 2 that have not been on Infinite Campus very long. You may see this, and attendance is another one. Attendance is behavior and attendance. Those two really need some time for the curves to normalize. But curriculum, remember I told you GPA was an indicator? Well, and this student, he has a 0.375 GPA. And so is he on track? He's only earned 2 credits, and that's why their curriculum score is low. Right? In stability, you can look at some of the things that go into a student's stability. It's looking at their portal logins, how many years they've been in school, years in the district. This is one that's going to throw you off because it's going to say like 125 because they started in 1901. But again, where this is going to start adjusting is as that student moves. So even though they started at 1901, they moved in October, they moved again in January, again in March, then those are going to start showing that student is the total address locations is going to start showing and feeding into the model and affecting the model. If I wanted to, again, I would not show a student this, but I can view as a PDF. And when you print it as a PDF, what you see on this screen is what it will print out for you. And I don't know why it took me so long. I used to hit my back button all the time. But here at the bottom, there is a close button that will take you back to your students. And again, to me, early warning is the easiest to click around and get around in. Early warning is just harder to understand and make sure that you understand how they are arriving at these scores for the students. I do want to show you in the presentation, I have an example of end user RTI, and this is just talking about if you do interventions within the system. But I want to show you a picture. If you do interventions in the system, those interventions will also display in the early warning. So as you notice, this is an early warning screen. And so this student has interventions that are done with them, and they are showing in the graph area where it says opportunity for change. This is showing that student's intervention. And not only that, I can click on the graph and I can see is that intervention. So let's say they've got a notice that their category impact, they need to be putting some structures in place for their curriculum. And what they are doing is they are doing interventions with the student, and it is also graphing whether that intervention is working or not. So again, that's another area where there's a piece of Infinite Campus. If you use the response to intervention, that feeds into your early warning. You can also, that also feeds into insights. All right. I have about 7 minutes. And so I'm going to go to Chris and see if there's any questions that I put in.
Yeah, so we've got a couple questions I'm going to throw out there for you, Leanne. You've answered a good number of them. One person did ask why they would potentially not see a behavior score on their early warning page. So I thought you might want to hit that again for those folks.
Okay, and Aaron, I don't mean to put you on the spot yet, but if you are phase 2, that behavior data has it been uploaded yet into the system?
Yes, it has been for the vast majority of districts. I think there might be one district out there that it hasn't been done for, but they will know who they are.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that is a very good question. And so I get that one a lot on the behavior side. And if you notice, the student that I chose did not have any behavior data. Now, if you notice that student had no suspensions, it's looking at when you go to look at your behavior information. Last year, I could tell them that your behavior data hadn't been uploaded yet. This year, it sounds like your behavior data has been uploaded. And so if that student doesn't have any incidents, then that, of course, that student wouldn't have anything with the behavior. So that's why I would not show anything. Good question.
While you're on that page, can you remind folks where they can print that PDF there on that screen?
Yes, right here where it says at the very bottom, it says view as PDF. And so you can print it there. Okay.
So Leanne, we have an update to that question about not seeing behavior data. They're saying that they don't have a behavior section listed at all on there.
Oh, that's probably a tool right then.
Yeah.
That is probably a tool right. And so what I usually tell, if there's any coordinators on this, I usually say that with early warning, if they are school level administrators or school level instructional leaders, then just click all. Even the delete, there's nothing they can delete that's going to hurt anything. So just click all so they'd see everything. Oh, good question. Well, we answered the other two because if you notice, this one it's a comparison score. So this student has no behavior, but you have to still realize it is a comparison score of all the other features. This is not everything that goes into behavior. So I'm really glad you asked that question because that's confusing. Why do they have a score of 103 when they have no behavior data? But again, it is a comparison score and it's not looking at just this. It's looking at a lot of other features of the student with the behavior. All right. What else?
That's a great point because we had a couple questions about the color coding and the numbers, and how those numbers change. And we just want to remind folks that it's a comparison of like students and it is a predictive score. And so that can change at any time depending on the data, and that can vary from school and district.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Otherwise, I think you've got everything answered here, Leanne.
All right. Well, I want to thank you. If you do not mind, in the last screen of the presentation, I would appreciate it if you would go to where it says finishing up, and under finishing up, there is a feedback. So if you'll click on that feedback form and leave some feedback, I do try to to change this. Matter of fact, the piece about the anonymous, whether the data is anonymous, that came from feedback. That was one of the questions that was asked in some of the feedback. And if there's someone that didn't, I mean, I got another 3 or 4 minutes, so if you didn't and you want to ask it, feel free.
I have a question.
Okay.
If within Infinite Campus, if the early warning system is not listed under the counseling section, is that would be a rights issue?
Correct. That's a tool right.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone has a great Monday.
And Leanne, I'm curious because I saw Anna put it in the chat, but I'd love to hear your answer around, does early warning take into account any, like, I know it probably takes into account like if they have an RTI plan, but does it take into account any of like the data or progress monitoring that goes into that plan as well? Okay.
No, it doesn't. And if you go to, let me pull that up and I'll show you because, and again, I'm hesitant sometimes to show this because this list is constantly changing because it's based on the model. But I have a list here of the fields that go into it. The early warning data points. And in those early warning data points, this shows you all the different things that go into it. And it shows you where it's located within the system. So in the presentation, it will show you that. But I'm trying to remember grades, assessment. Yeah, the RTI is not. RTI. But that doesn't mean that it won't eventually, because again, the model, they keep seeing, does this feature affect the model? And if it does, then they'll add it as a feature.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.